It's in the name.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast. You may hear a little banging around in there from, Mrs. Mars Hill cooking it up. She might jump in, join us. Who knows? You'll find out. The only way you'll find out is to hang around after these important messages. This episode of the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast is presented by Faulkner University. Faulkner University is a private Christian liberal arts university based in Montgomery, Alabama, with a mission to provide an education anchored by not only intellect, but also character and service. The Faulkner experience aims to educate the whole person. Every individual matters every day. We all want to become better versions of ourselves. No one wants to remain trapped where they are because of missed opportunities and unrealized dreams. At Faulkner University, we believe your dreams don't have an expiration date. We understand that you're looking for more than a degree. You want to find your niche and thrive in your career. Whether you're a high school senior just beginning your trek or an adult student looking for a better path, Faulkner is here to help guide your journey. Go to faulkner.edu to apply or get more info. That's faulkner.edu. I'm Travis Creasy. We're here to talk about forgiveness. I forgot to say that in the intro, part 2. And that is all pro counselor, 3-Chord Counseling in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, preaching minister at Highland Park Church of Christ. Ben Hayes, what's going on with you?
Not a whole lot. Just looking forward to some Friday night football tonight in just a little bit. I guess it will already be over. I don't know what will have happened in that game when this airs, but there'll probably be a couple of games under our belt by that time. But just looking forward to it. Just glad it's Friday night football, Saturday, all-day footballs now. I mean, it's just the best time of the year.
Most wonderful time of the year. The youth minister at Highland Park, who also not only puts up with Ben, but Miss Mars Hill herself. Will, how's it going?
Yeah, it's best time of the year and worst time of the year because normally we would get up to go watch game day and just start preparing for football. But instead, we get up at like 7 a.m. to go watch Miss Mars Hill run a 5K with a bunch of other of our youth group members that decide for some reason, why play football or basketball or any other sport where we can sit? Let's make the youth minister run around a open field and chase us. So
it's a great intro to talk about forgiveness. We'll start with that, forgiveness. If you didn't listen to episode 1, we talked about how forgiveness helps us physically, how it helps us emotionally. And we'll start off with probably the most obvious one. If you're listening to this podcast for any amount of time, forgiveness helps us spiritually, namely because we have been forgiven. We need to forgive, and we'll mention this in the last episode, forgive as God forgives us. And we mentioned that is a lofty goal because he, forgets. He forgives and forgets and doesn't hold it against us. And I think I sometimes get in the image in my head of me bringing up things to the Lord. And he's like, either A, we've covered this, right? Have you ever done that in a counseling, Ben? Hey, we've already been over this. We handled this. Or, hey, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I don't know which way it works, but that's kind of the image I get. So
my favorite thing is when people come in and they're like, I know that I've kind of tried to hint at or mention some things a couple of times and they just completely ignore it. And then someone else comes and tells them, the exact same thing, or they read it in an article and they're like, look, I need to tell you about this amazing thing. My daughter sometimes does that to me too. There are other family members who oftentimes will, but it's like, you can try to tell them, but they got to hear it from somebody else.
We are all in the field together where that happens, man. How many times you preach a sermon? 2 weeks ago, a week ago, and the next week they're like, man, I've never heard a sermon about this. And you're like, yeah, you did. You sat through it last week. How many times, right? Or a football coach. Oh, I saw this drill. We've never done that one before. We do it in every practice. But
it kind of goes back to the thought from last week that we talked about, and that is like it's a self-discovery thing, and that's why as counselors we don't. Somebody said, when does the advice start? It's like, well, we don't really give advice per se. I try not to give advice. I try to just help you sort of think about some things you haven't thought about before. And then you have to make the decision, because I know when you walk out of the office, it's not anything I've said that's going to make you do it. You've got to do it. And so sometimes it's hearing it 3 or 4 times and then you finally go, this is what I need to do. And so I think it's impressive that Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, the same way you forgive, you're going to be forgiven. So you better remember that, not just with your other people, but with God. And then several times in Paul's letters, Colossians 3:13, Ephesians 4:32, he comes out and says, just as God in Christ has forgiven you. Like, you forgive other people because God's already done it for you.
In case you've forgotten, and yeah, I'll let you jump in here in a second, but I think of remember the foreigner, because you were a foreigner, right? You treat the slave well because you were a slave. And, God brings you up on that pedestal, but that pedestal also has a few requirements, provisos, and the quid pro. Yeah.
We're talking about benefits of like helping us spiritually or mature spiritually. One thing I've tried to get across to our group and even the kids at Mars Hill is the other day I said, I don't want you to raise your hands or anything. But how many of you, if we died right now, are going to heaven? And of course you have like, the half hand, it's like, well, maybe, or I hope so.
I bet Destin's a half-handed person. I bet don't pick me.
Don't pick me. Don't pick me. And I looked at him and I said, guys, this is crazy. Like, if we die, I'm going to heaven. It's like, I know that I'm going. And they're like, well, you just got it all together. And I was like, no, because I understand forgiveness.
Quite the opposite. I'm aware.
And it's like this whole thing of, and I think it goes back to basketball, football, really any coach thing. I see it all the time where a kid messes up and a coach yanks them immediately, and it's like they never allow the kid to ever gain any hope in that I can go out here and I can play free. And if I play free, I'm probably going to do a whole lot better than if I play timid. Yep. And I think it's the same way in our spiritual life. If I truly understand, hey, I'm forgiven, then it motivates me to go do so much more for Jesus. Because even though I know I'm going to screw up or I'm going to say the wrong thing, hey, we're going to have that Bible study. I'm going to try and stand up for somebody. I'm going to try and be different than everybody else. And when I screw up, it's not that, Nate Evan Abihu or, Anos Fire a boom, like I'm dead. But I understand that I have this freedom in Christ because of the forgiveness. And I think we throw the caveat, as long as I'm giving my best effort, right? Like this, as long as I'm trying, God's faithful. If I'm
not willfully out there trying to sin and need more forgiveness.
Right. And I think our world needs more Christians that can live in a reckless abandon for Jesus. And it's like, we're just going to go out here and we're going to be Jesus. And we're not going to be scared to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing because we understand what that forgiveness is. But like, I love my parents, but there were so many times growing up where I sinned, and I can picture it right now, like looking out of my parents or my bedroom window, looking out into my parents' front yard going, am I lost or am I saved? Well, I did these 3 things today. So 2 of them were good. 1 of them was bad. Well, I guess that means I'm lost because I didn't get, I didn't get all 3 things right. And it was just this teeter-totter of lost, saved, lost, saved, lost, saved. And I was terrified to do anything because I was so scared of screwing up and then being lost. And then the older I started to get, I go, oh, that is not the way that God works at all. So it's like, let's go. We're going to go out here and we're going to be free and we're going to live in such a way where we have motivation to influence people. And so I think even understanding this forgiveness, it benefits us to live more free, which then widens our influence on a lot of people.
Well, and spiritually speaking, when we start thinking about our kids, I mean, I love my kids, but sometimes they just don't do really smart things, like most kids. And I didn't do really smart things as a kid. I made a lot of mistakes, and I've compared it to that several times with people. Just because my kids mess up, I don't stop loving them. I don't toss them out the door. I don't go, well, you messed up, you're out. And when you say you're sorry, I'll let you back in the house. I mean, we don't do that to our kids. We don't throw them out and let them back in and throw them
That's
out.
not what parents do. Oh, sorry.
I mean, we might make them go run laps around the house, or we might make them do something, but we didn't like boot them out of our good graces. And so why would we think God does that? Because God even says, hey, if you know how to give good gifts to your kids, then don't you know I know how to give good gifts to
you just nailed it. It's a gift. And
Yeah.
we have lost the art of gift giving. Christmas rolls around and Ben gives me a gift. I'm embarrassed if I didn't get him one. Well, that's really the opposite of what a gift is.
Right.
A gift really has nothing to do with what you're going to get me. And we kind of train our kids to get to that point. And I'm thankful, as a coach and even as just a human being, there's a lot of merit-based stuff out there, and it has to be. Like as a coach, I have to play the best kid.
Right.
But also play, there goes into that who's practiced all week. They deserve. And so there's that hard balance to find, but that's not Christianity. It is not merit-based. It's not, I did this many good things, and so now God is going to save me. And thankfully that's the case. But it's our response to the gift that God has given. Forgive. We are giving. He gave us something before we ever did anything to deserve it. It's my response to what he's given that makes me want to do the good. And one of those good things is to forgive like he did. And that helps us relationally, which is the last point. Ben, go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to say. It kind of leads into, because I think about that story where in Matthew chapter 18, like the story of the man who was forgiven this great debt, and he turned around and took the guy by the throat and said, you will pay me back. And I think about and that's the gift that God gave us. And Jesus is trying to remind us. In fact, the book of Matthew just says it over and over again. Maybe Matthew understood it. Maybe Matthew, as a tax collector who'd been an outcast for most of his life, was kind of like, hey guys, we got to forgive people. He had to forgive some people, I'm sure. He also was hoping others would forgive him. And so he talked about this a lot, and this idea of God's forgiven us, but relationally we need to forgive the people who've hurt us too. And what a great gift. Like if that guy had said, hey, my debt's been paid, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to let someone else's debt be forgiven that they owe me. What a great gift that would have been to him. I mean, to his own self. Look, I can let go of that because something else has been let go of. And instead, he ends up being punished as a result of it. And Jesus is just trying to remind us, look, you've been forgiven. And so relationally, this does you benefits to forgive the people around you. Again, as a counselor, I know I can't tell people to do that. I can't make people do that. They've got to discover that. But I think most people who have ever truly forgiven somebody of something that was painful has learned just how beautiful of a thing it is.
Well, that can't possibly help in the youth ministry world, right?
Never.
Relational connection through forgiving one another.
Well, that's what I was just looking at here. Like, I think of passages like Ephesians 4:3, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. John 17, that all of them may be one. Father, just as you're in me and I am you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe. Like, we look at these relationships. Jesus says, people will know that you're my disciples by your love for one another. And I believe for us to truly reach what Jesus is getting at with unity, his desires for what the church looks like, relationships have to be strong. And for our influence in the world to truly impact those that are lost, like they need to see a united body of people who care and love for one another. And if we can't even love the people that love us, those within the church, within our own family, if the people we do life with every day, we can't even learn to forgive them, then how are we ever going to be a source of peace and comfort to the world? And so I would even say to accept the challenge that God has given to us. And I tell our kids all the time, our goal is for this group, however big or small it is, to be so strong that people go, hey, I want to be a part of that. Yeah. Right. Because I see their relationships and I see how well they work. And that's something that I need in my own life. And so I think forgiveness is at the center of that, of just being able to say, hey, we're going to build our relationships on this idea of there's nothing that you're going to do to me that is going to separate us because of Jesus, right?
What?
I'm going to do everything that I can so that we stay together, whether that's on me or that's on you. However we need to work through it, we're going to put the effort in so that others can then come to know Jesus. And I think a lot of times, and especially in the youth ministry world, I think a lot of youth ministers are going, well, you need to know, X amount of verses and how to quote this so that you can go influence your friends. And what Lindsay and I have tried to do is, hey, you need to love each other so that people can see how fun and how enjoyable it is.
You're going to want to be a part of that.
Yes. And I think forgiveness allows those relationships to happen so that people do see and are attracted to that.
So let me drop this little gem out there. I read this. It says, forgiveness gets you out of victim mode. And think about, how many people are walking around carrying this big old bag of, past stuff that they're having to carry and haul around all the time. And every word you say to them, they're all of a sudden defensive and frustrated and angry. And I've been there. I feel like I've been at that point at a lot of times where you're just carrying that. Yeah. And you just want to respond and you want to lash out in those moments. And so forgiveness allows you to kind of step out of that victim mode. Like, I'm not the victim here.
I think what you're describing here is influence, right? Like, I don't want that person, even if you go forgiveness at the most selfish level, if you think about it, I don't want that person to be able to influence me. There are a lot of people who are like, I'll never let my parents influence me. I hate those people and I'll never forgive. Well, they're
influencing you. Yeah.
You're shackling yourself. And once again, there is trauma, obviously, and you have to work through that depending on what level you're at. But yeah, I mean, it's influence. And what you said there about what am I willing to sacrifice for peace? I'm not saying sacrifice God's laws and his commands and the direct ones that we know exactly what he meant, although that's kind of where people start sometimes. But what about my wants? Like, I think the youth group should look like this. Well, that's great. But is that going to promote the unity of the group? Mm-hmm. Are you putting your wants and desires ahead of everyone else? And that's what I get from that passage you read. Like, for the unity of peace, what are you willing to sacrifice to keep the peace? And maybe the youth group would flourish this way, but it's not necessarily what I would do with the youth group. Well, it's the betterment of the group. And am I willing to sacrifice for that? And that's peace. And people see the love. Man, that draws people in. It really does.
What you were saying a second ago, it goes right down to that idea of people's words only have the power that I give them. People's words only have the power I give them. People's actions only have the power that I give them.
So many people that benefit from the victim mentality, right? We won't get into politics because that's coming around, but from politicians to preachers, right? There are preachers out there that want you to stay in that victim mentality. They want you to just revel in the church hurt that you got down there so that you'll stay here. Mm-hmm. Or, maybe I'm getting too into everybody's going to be mad at me, but like people want to influence and manipulate you that way. As a man, I've probably done that, right? If you're a victim, that means I can use that to keep you close to me and you don't go wandering off to somewhere else or whatever. And that in itself is hard, but it's influence. It's that weight that you carry around for sure.
And I don't think everybody does that intentionally. I mean, like, as far as the being the victim kind of thought, I mean, there are certainly people who've been hurt terribly. Yes, so don't
are victims.
I don't want anybody to go away thinking.
And oddly enough, those people tend to be some of the most forgiving people sometimes, right? You're like, they have a legit reason
right
to struggle with forgiveness, and yet here they are dealing it out every single day, and we believe that peace is certainly found in Jesus.
And the reason they're a lot of the people who have such deep hurt forgive so deeply is because they know the benefits that we've been talking about. They recognize emotionally, spiritually, physically, relationally, they had to forgive to move beyond where they were. They could stay in the pit, or they could find that way to forgive, and they recognize the benefits of it. And so we're not blaming anyone or not telling anyone, hey, you're a terrible person if you haven't forgiven anybody.
You shouldn't be hurting. I mean, that's
what we're trying to tell you is there is hope in forgiveness.
A lot at the end of that plan.
It's the way God planned it for you, is to find that forgiveness. And we hope that your exploration of it, it lands you in a place where you can lay all that down at the foot of the cross, but also lay it down for those people around you and hopefully have a freer mindset as a result of it.
Hey parents and young adventurers, are you ready to embark on an extraordinary journey? Introducing The Adventures of Ben and Travis and the Worry Coaster, a thrilling ride through the ups and downs of mental health in our new children's book. Join our dynamic duo as they navigate the twists and turns of their emotions while discovering the courage to conquer their worries. Pre-order your ticket to adventure now at benandtravis.com/books and be among the first to embark on this roller coaster of resilience. Let's turn worry into wonder and empower kids to embrace their feelings with bravery and hope. Buckle up. It's going to be an unforgettable ride.
The Friday refresh question of the day is, what's something maybe spiritually, or maybe something you've connected spiritually that you've learned maybe in the last few weeks or months that's kind of just been eye-opening or maybe like impactful for you? But just as a reminder, forgiveness helps us physically, it helps us emotionally, and as we've covered today, helps us spiritually and relationally. And I'm going to tell you, I've been teaching all the middle school boys, and when I say all, I mean all the middle school boys at Riverside, 6th through 8th grade, one room, and boy howdy, kind of smells in there. But we've been doing Joshua, and you get to this story of Jericho, right? And you have Rahab the harlot. It's in the name, right? And she hides the spies, and she's obedient to what the spies tell her, and she gets saved. Her whole family, right? A harlot, Jericho, Rahab. She's probably not really connected and understands all the theological stuff with Yahweh God. Okay? More than likely, because I don't. And I've done it for years. Then you have this Achan, right? Who's a Jew, who's seen all the things that God has done. And he takes this thing, and 36 people die. You know, because I remember thinking growing up and going, man, I feel terrible for Achan. You know, Achan and his whole family. Terrible. But this idea of justice, it goes along with forgiveness, right? Like, what is the defining quality of Rahab? Right? It's not that she's a harlot, although that kind of almost makes it shine even more that she was obedient. She listened, she obeyed, she did what she was told. What's the defining deal that we remember Achan for? He heard it, he disobeyed, and he paid the price.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's what Josh was really about, is listen to me. I am with you. And so, man, that just jumped off the page to me. And also the idea that if Achan gets off scot, 36 people lost a loved one who did not come home, that didn't necessarily not obey God. And so, you know, if we don't forgive people, there's consequences. If we hurt people, there are consequences. And so that's just something that I've been like, whoa, like that just opened up why those stories are back to back. Rahab is in the lineage of Jesus. You know, if you're going to leave a person out of that storyline, right, there are probably people in our own genealogies that would be like, yeah, you know, Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so or Cousin so-and-so, we'll leave him out. But there she is for the whole world to see, and it's simply because simple obedience.
Yeah.
So that's something that's blown me away.
Interesting thing about that story that somebody brought up to me, so I'll just kind of bounce off that. I may think of something else.
What I just said, or like,
no, it's the same thing.
Right, Ed Gallagher, you know.
No, their thought was, do you know why that that they were so angry with Achan, or that he was so angry with Achan about that, him taking things from Jericho, because Jericho was one of, if not the first city, right? That was the first major
I think
battle.
the first one, major, yeah.
Yeah. So he had just told them,
In Joshua, yeah.
yeah, in Joshua. But he, one of the things back in this was what we were studying, Exodus chapter 12 and 13, where they're about to go out of the land, or out of Egypt. And he's kind of telling them about the consecration of the firstborn, and about the Passover, and about unleavened bread, kind of as they're leaving. And so basically, you give me all the firsts.
Yeah.
Jericho was the first.
Yeah.
Jericho was
the next, when they go to Ai again, he tells them, now you can take the plunder.
right.
Yeah.
Because, it's yours now, but Jericho was mine, and you took what was mine. And so that's that whole idea of, I'm giving you
Trust me to give you.
stuff. Yeah, I'm giving you everything. Trust me with the first fruits. Trust me with your firstborn. Trust me with your crops. Trust me with whatever. And I just thought that was kind of neat too, and it kind of went with your story. So,
boom.
What you got, Will?
What you got on Rahab, Will? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no doubt. We're studying Job, so at Mars Hill. So it's just
now there's the party.
Question after question after question. I'm going to go a little bit more practical. I think the thing that's been big for me in the past 2 to 3 weeks has been community, and just the power, like the true power of community, and connecting people to not just yourself, but other people within the church. I've had a friend come back to the church, and I won't go into a story because one day it will be a podcast that will be huge. But addiction has been a very rampant part of his history and his life. And he texted me the other day and said, "Hey man, I'm 8 months sober, 8 months from some pretty heavy stuff. And we've been getting together every Tuesday with anywhere from 6 to 11 guys that are 20, 25 to 40, and he's 18. And it has just taken off in his life, just to see what community really does, and how the support of several people checking in on a person, how it can ultimately change their life. And I've been so amazed to watch how God can work through a bunch of people that just simply care. And out of those dudes, there's some really smart biblical people. But it hasn't been the biblical knowledge that's changed his life. It's been the, hey, I'll answer a text, I'll buy you lunch, I'll buy you supper, and I want to do life with you. And he's a guy that's still working through some high school stuff, and he's hanging out with these guys that are doctors, and I'm just, to see the difference of, hey, here's a guy who spent 10 to 12 years studying to specialize in the healthcare field, and he's hanging out with an 18-year-old. And it's just like Jesus connects us in so many ways that we could just never imagine that we would be connected to the people that we're truly connected to. And so, man, I would just challenge so many people, take the step to just care for somebody, because it literally is changing eternity in several people's lives right now that I know, that I've just had the opportunity to go, hey, I don't know that I can help you fully, but I'm going to connect you to somebody that can. And because of that, it's made our congregation stronger. And so community is just, man, faith community is so big and it's so important. And I think so many times to us, community is within the walls of the church. But true change and transformation happens in the community outside the walls of the church. So
love people where they are. Love them enough not to leave them there.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.